The Crusades and the Origins of the Renaissance. Introduction. The Crusades, a series of military campaigns launched by Christian Europe to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim control, are often viewed primarily as religious and military events. However, their impact extended far beyond the battlefield, influencing the intellectual, cultural, and economic developments that paved the way for the Renaissance. The Crusades, spanning from the late 11th century to the 13th century, catalyzed a series of social, political, and cultural changes that ultimately led to the intellectual rebirth of Europe during the Renaissance. This essay explores how the Crusades, through their effects on trade, knowledge, religious thought, and the movement of people, helped lay the groundwork for the Renaissance, the period of artistic, scientific, and intellectual flourishing that marked the transition from the medieval to the early modern era. 1. The Crusades as catalysts for cultural exchange. Exposure to Islamic knowledge and classical antiquity. One of the most significant effects of the Crusades was the contact between Christian Europe and the advanced Muslim civilizations of the Middle East. The Crusaders encountered not only Islamic military might, but also the rich cultural and intellectual achievements of the Muslim world, including classical texts and preservation of knowledge. The Crusaders came into contact with ancient Greek and Roman texts that had been preserved and translated into Arabic by Muslim scholars. This body of knowledge had been largely forgotten in the West, but its revival during the Crusades laid the foundation for the intellectual movements that defined the Renaissance. Scientific and philosophical advancements. The Muslims had made significant advancements in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy, much of which was transmitted back to Europe. Works by scholars such as Avicenna, Ibn Sina, and Averroes, Ibn Rushd, were translated into Latin, reviving European interest in classical philosophy and science. Medical knowledge. Crusaders encountered advanced medical practices in the Islamic world. The translation of medical texts, including the works of Galen and Hippocrates, contributed to the growth of medical knowledge in Europe during the Renaissance. Trade and the flow of ideas. The Crusades opened new trade routes between Europe and the Middle East, which not only facilitated the exchange of goods but also allowed for the cross-pollination of ideas, silk, spices, and luxuries. The Crusades facilitated the flow of luxury goods, such as spices, silk, and precious metals, from the East to Europe. This trade led to economic growth, particularly in Italian cities such as Venice and Genoa, which became commercial hubs for the exchange of goods and ideas. The role of Italian city-states. The Italian city-states, especially Venice, became the centers of Renaissance culture and learning. Their wealth from trade provided the financial support needed for artistic and intellectual endeavors, fueling the rise of Renaissance patronage. 2. The rise of intellectual curiosity and humanism. The revival of classical learning. The exposure to classical texts during the Crusades contributed to the intellectual climate that eventually led to the Renaissance humanism movement. Humanism emphasized a return to the study of classical antiquity, particularly the works of Greek and Roman philosophers, poets, and historians. Translation movements. As a result of the Crusades, many ancient Greek and Latin texts were rediscovered and translated into Latin. Scholars such as Petrarch, often considered the father of Renaissance humanism, and Giovanni Boccaccio were instrumental in reviving interest in classical antiquity. Humanism and education. The Crusades sparked an interest in education, and universities began to expand. The study of the classics became a cornerstone of Renaissance education, and the development of printing technology in the 15th century further democratized access to knowledge. The impact of Islamic scholarship on European thought. The Crusades brought Western Europe into closer contact with Islamic scholarship, which had been preserving and advancing the learning of ancient Greece and Rome during the Dark Ages. Philosophy and logic. Islamic philosophers like Al-Farabi, Avicenna, and Averroes played a key role in reintroducing Aristotle's works to the West, helping to shape medieval scholasticism. These works would later influence Renaissance thinkers such as Thomas Aquinas and contribute to the intellectual climate of the Renaissance. Mathematics and astronomy. The Crusaders encountered advanced mathematical concepts and astronomical observations, particularly from the works of Al-Khwarizmi and al-Battani, which were later integrated into European scientific thinking. 3. The growth of secularism and the decline of feudalism. The rise of powerful monarchies. The Crusades weakened the feudal system in Europe and contributed to the rise of powerful monarchies. Many feudal lords sold land or gave up control of their territories to finance their participation in the Crusades. This shift in land ownership helped centralize political power, laying the groundwork for the formation of stronger, more centralized states. Monarchical power. As Crusader lords returned from the Holy Land, they often returned with greater wealth and influence, enabling monarchs to consolidate power and exert more control over their territories. Economic growth and urbanization. The growth of commerce and trade during the Crusades led to the rise of towns and cities, where secular governance structures began to emerge. This urbanization contributed to the decline of the feudal system, leading to the rise of the bourgeoisie and early capitalism. The decline of religious authority. While the Crusades were initiated by the Church, their failure to achieve long-term success, especially after the loss of Jerusalem to Saladin in 1187, contributed to the decline of the Church's authority in Europe. Criticism of Church leadership. The financial burdens and ethical dilemmas of the Crusades, including the sack of Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade, 1204, led to growing disillusionment with the Church. This atmosphere of criticism paved the way for the Renaissance and the Reformation, both of which questioned the authority of the Church and emphasized a more personal and direct relationship with God. Secular ideals. As a result of the Crusades and the social changes they spurred, secular ideals began to flourish. Renaissance thinkers emphasized human potential, reason, and the importance of worldly life, values that shifted away from the medieval focus on salvation and the afterlife. 4. The impact on art, architecture, and patronage. Influence of Eastern art and architecture. The Crusades exposed European Christians to the rich artistic and architectural traditions of the Islamic world and the Byzantine Empire. These influences significantly impacted the development of Renaissance art and architecture. 4. The impact on art, architecture, and patronage. Influence of Eastern art and architecture. The Crusades exposed European Christians to the rich artistic and architectural traditions of the Islamic world and the Byzantine Empire. These influences significantly impacted the development of Renaissance art and architecture. Gothic and Byzantine influences. Crusader encounters with the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world influenced the development of Gothic architecture in Europe, with its emphasis on intricate designs and verticality, which later influenced Renaissance architecture. Artistic techniques. Crusaders also encountered new artistic techniques in the Islamic world, such as the use of perspective and intricate geometric designs, which were later incorporated into Renaissance art. The role of wealth in artistic patronage. The wealth accumulated through trade during the Crusades, particularly in the Italian city-states, led to the rise of powerful merchant families like the Medici in Florence. These families became major patrons of the arts, financing the works of artists like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael. Patronage of the arts. The economic prosperity spurred by Crusader trade routes allowed wealthy families to fund the creation of masterpieces, giving rise to some of the most iconic works of the Renaissance. Art as a tool of political and religious power. During the Renaissance, art became a tool not only for religious devotion but also for political expression, with rulers using art to legitimize their power and showcase their wealth. 5. Conclusion. The Crusades as a catalyst for the Renaissance. The Crusades played a pivotal role in setting the stage for the Renaissance by facilitating cultural exchange, reviving classical learning, promoting economic growth, and challenging medieval religious authority. While the Crusades were originally motivated by religious zeal, their impact was far-reaching and extended into the realms of intellectual, economic, and cultural transformation. The exposure to Eastern knowledge, the rise of secularism, the decline of feudalism, and the expansion of trade networks all contributed to the intellectual environment that made the Renaissance possible. Thus, while the Crusades themselves were rooted in religious conflict, their legacy was one of profound change, ushering in an era of rediscovery, innovation, and the flowering of human achievement that defined the Renaissance.